Welcome to the NCO Journal podcast, where we explore NCO professional development. This is a podcast series where we discuss published articles with authors and provide a forum for the open exchange of ideas, information, and solutions. I'm your host, Staff Sergeant Brandon Cox, the Journal's senior editor. With us is Chaga Zapata, the managing editor, and Sergeant First Class Osvaldo Akite, the NCOIC of the NCO Journal. Today we discuss the article Cultural Awareness as a Weapon by author Sergeant Major Ed Fayette. Before we kick things off, could you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, hey guys, thanks, and thank you for having me. Sergeant Major Ed Fayette. I'm the Chief Advisor for Reserve Affairs at the Psychological Operations Proponent here at the JFK Special Warfare Center and School. 24 years of service this year, and all of that as a Psychological Operations Specialist. Here at the Proponent, I support the Proponent Director and Division Leads in navigating reserve component PSYOP peculiarities, as well as support the RC operational force as an embedded touch point for them, ensuring reserve components concerns and interests are addressed and incorporated in proponent efforts here. I don't know how familiar our audience is with the proponent functions, but a proponency, in short, is kind of a manager for a CMF, for a branch, for the MIL-PF, kind of Army modernization domain. Specifically here, we develop doctrine, training, leader policy, personnel, those kinds of things specifically for the psychological operations component.
So you guys are constantly busy. That's what it sounds like.
No, there's never enough people to do everything that needs to be done. The 30 soldiers and civilians we have in the psychological operations proponent here are responsible for, over 28 doctrinal publications. We manage all of the combined arms training strategy, collective tasks, individual training tasks, 13 separate course POIs, and all the 8 life cycle functions. It's a lot for a small team.
Let's dive right into your article here. Could you tell us what was this article and what inspired you to write it?
Well, in 2021, I was attending the Sergeant Major Academy, Class 72, Trust and Inspire. So we have a kind of a professional writing paper that kind of becomes one of your capstone papers out of the 100 or so that you'll write there, and they encourage you to write. Like most writers, I think, write about, either what you know or something you're passionate about. And certainly cultural awareness, and specifically foreign cultural awareness, is something that, as a psychological operations specialist, is drilled into us from the very beginning. So it wasn't only something that, I knew a bit about, but it was something I was, passionate then in learning more about. And at its core, it's a research paper. So I took it as an opportunity to not only learn more about the importance of cultural awareness, and I think most of us kind of grasp the core of that, but how we can go further, how we can improve as an Army at it, as well as at the individual soldier level. So, so this article highlighted some things like the language and regional education centers that TRADOC has out across the country, as well as even on my own study. Then JKO, J Knowledge Online, has a preponderance, a large number of courses in cultural training, rapport, etc. So I took that on as a subject, and cultural awareness in general, and the research kind of pointed me towards regional alignment of forces, and then further on to, like I said, driving down from that big strategic concept of RAF down to, how do we culturally educate the soldiers who are going to be on ground interacting with foreign audiences.
Yeah, Sergeant Major, and you did say that you were, passionate about the subject, and that's why you wanted to write about it. Do you have a personal anecdote of why cultural awareness is so important to you?
I mean, I can probably, maybe it's a great example to one of my biggest miscues. I guess I can offer up here, but as a very young soldier in Thailand supporting a Cobra Gold exercise. And at one point I was trying to write a bit of information, a number I think I was passing along to someone, and I had no paper in my pocket. And of course, the one thing I did have was some Thai currency, which of course features the royal family on it. And as I began to write this number on this piece of currency, it's normally U.S. culture, not such a big deal, right? But immediately everyone in the room, jumped out of their seats to stop me from defacing the royal family. So I offer that as, even as a culturally aware soldier, like there was additional knowledge, that I should have had, that I could have had with a little more training that could have prevented what ultimately was just an embarrassing situation. But those kind of things at scale can certainly cause unnecessary misunderstandings with our foreign partners.
That brings up an experience that I had when I was in Iraq on my second deployment. My unit was tasked to go to we went to an orphanage to fix it up. A bunch of kids were there. We had our translator was a woman. We went in there. She was great. She was she got us talking to the kids. There were some adults there and everything. And we fixed up the place. We fixed plumbing. We did all kinds of things for the orphanage. But at the end, when we were getting ready, when we packed up, we were getting ready to leave. I was one of the last people to leave, and I without thinking about it, I thrust my hand out for a handshake to say thank you. And I didn't even think about it. I just kind of threw my hand out there, and she kind of hesitantly reached out and shook it, and everybody in the room there was just a sudden gasp, like, and I'm like, oh, I got really. I'm like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. I didn't realize that what I'd done. That I just touched this young woman. I think she was unmarried. She was wearing the traditional garb, and I didn't really know too much. They didn't tell us too much about women and what you should or shouldn't do. They did give it. We did get a short PowerPoint presentation before we deployed. So I ran out of there. I took my hand back and I hauled butt to the Humvee and we took off. But I've always wondered if maybe that little interaction where I she touched an infidel, maybe did something bad happen to her? I don't know. I think it's important to be aware and be conscious of what you do, and that everything that you do has consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our intention with our actions doesn't always come across. So while we would treat a foreigner visiting us, we'd grant a little leeway, understanding they may not understand our cultures and those kinds of things. But there are in that cultural onion, there's some pretty primary things like cultural taboos, et cetera, that just sometimes we don't have room for excusing. But those are the items, when we talk about cultural literacy and kind of the levels of cultural awareness training, those primary functions of cultural awareness need to be what are those taboo items, what are those things that can lead to the greatest number of or severity of misunderstandings, those kind of things. And even knowing those items, knowing how to successfully or how would have been appropriate to greet someone in their culture, in their language. The littlest amount of cultural knowledge up to that point, goes far to show, the audience on the other side, that you did put effort into adapting to their culture and learning their culture, and as a result, those kind of social miscues are more likely to be forgiven.
Now these things happened even though you said, Trago, that you received some kind of training.
Yeah, we had a short PowerPoint presentation before we deployed. I can't even tell you how long it was. I mean, they told us, hey, don't show the bottom of your foot to these people.
Now, I don't know I don't know if we can announce on this podcast that a PowerPoint presentation didn't fix something in the Army. So
That's right.
Well, it was a Marine Corps. So
It was a Marine Corps PowerPoint.
it was a Marine Corps PowerPoint, and that it was very basic. But then again, it was 2004. We were just getting started in Iraq. There was a lot of things that we didn't know that we were just gearing up for, and that was definitely something that we were lacking in.
Oh, I was going to say even more so now, right? Like we have subject matter experts within our organization, or advisors at least, who have a role now in ensuring that those talking points and those things are understood across our force. I know that's it's a responsibility for your psychological operations forces, and to ensure supported commanders and soldiers are aware of those types of considerations when they're going into engagements and conversations. Those kind of things. I imagine PAO, takes a role in that as well.
Yeah, but even though these things were in place, or like you said, now we have special, I guess you could say MOSs, or people that are trained in this to come and advise. These kind of things still happen again, and I guess my point is that your article is making the case that we need to push this down even further, right? It needs to go a step further than what it is now. And so I guess my question would be, what is not happening right now? Or how is that that training not making it, or is not enough?
So I think there's multiple things going on. So I talk a lot about in the article about regional alignment of forces, kind of the overarching, the strategic concept where we assign specific units a geographic region around the world. And what that does is it helps us tailor the capabilities and readiness of that unit to address that unique region. So one of the most important things it does is that it gives those units time to incorporate that regional term, end up being in a PowerPoint presentation, which, in your own note, is not enough to provide the training level necessary to engage with foreign culture, something that's, so important. That human dimension is so important to our success overseas, especially in considering stability operations and such. So one, I think strategically continuing to push the regional alignment concept down to our organizations is the way to go. Army Special Operations Command is a primary example of that. DoD almost always geographically aligns their soft elements, and what that really does is it gives them the time required to develop that regional expertise. And ultimately, I think that's the answer, right? I think our soldiers need more time to get those things into training plans, so the individual soldier has the time and resources to access it. AR 350-1 goes a lot into, that's kind of our Army reference for CREL, for cultural regional expertise and language training, which stems from a DoD directive. But basically 350-1 lays out that our forces have to be capable of operating around foreign populations. And with that, they kind of extend foreign language proficiency even further past, our traditional linguists, interrogators, down to the individual soldier level. And that said, that doesn't necessarily translate into those things being on a unit training calendar, right? So I think my drive, my call to action, for the individual soldier listening to this podcast or reading this paper is a lot of these things are going to come down to self-development. Your ability to become culturally competent, at a base level, and to develop regional expertise going forward. A lot of that's going to come onto your plate. And there's resources out there. The TRADOC Language and Cultural Training Centers are an amazing resource designed and built to support units getting ready to deploy to a theater. But they provide a lot of individual soldier training resources as well. Brochures on cultural training, do's and don'ts, those kinds of things. Starting big strategic RAF all the way down to individual soldier training. And like I said, I think a lot of that's self-development. One of the examples I use in the article is Captain Travis Patriquin, who, although he had a background as a civil affairs special operations soldier, his language training came from self-study. His cultural expertise really came from self-study. And I go into the article in detail on how those things, those initiatives, including him growing a pretty awesome Iraqi-style mustache, directly led to success for his VCT in Iraq.
If I could, sorry, Ikite wanted to say something, but I think that a lot of it depends on individuals' drive and their likes and dislikes, and the Army actually taking advantage of these individuals who are interested in that kind of language training or interested in culture, learning about different cultures, and then taking advantage of them and sending them to training, but using that drive to in the Army's favor. I think it's an important thing, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, from a talent management aspect, right? If we can combine those two, soldier interests and special skills, with the operational environment or an assignment, that's a win-win situation. And I think while I think there's value in a basic level of cultural competence and what we call cultural capability, and that's just that, general awareness of cultural concepts that allows you to interact with, people of other cultures. Once you have that core understanding of awareness, that I need to be aware of those taboos. I need to be aware of maybe this culture, the way I engage with female members of the society, right? Like having that awareness transcends the specific region that you may have spent your time studying.
Is that what you meant with the title of the article, with cultural awareness as a weapon? Or maybe you can expand a little bit about what your ideas or thoughts were on that.
I guess aside from it being a flashy title that I'd hoped would win over my instructors at the academy, we in psychological operations we talk a lot about our loudspeaker system as being a weapon, and so really I'm talking about cultural awareness as a weapon in those terms. It's a tool that I think is often overlooked with the severity that it can impact a mission, both positive and negative. And I think that's why, DOD and Army understand that, why they've built, cultural awareness and training requirements into our guidance.
You talked about Abu Ghraib, and that was, I think that was pretty powerful, that used that as an example of, of soldiers who were not very culturally trained or aware.
They were not a lot of things.
There were not a lot of things. Which kind of, I'm glad that you brought that up in your article, and it made me think about if you live the Army values, if they're not just words that you just kind of you recite, but actually live them. I think that it's important that soldiers behave, even if they're not culturally aware or trained or whatever. If they live the Army values, I think that's going to go a long ways. But if you combine the two, then that's going to be a weapon system that's truly going to be effective, where people from a different culture will, if they see you as an honorable person, as somebody with integrity and courage and who respects them, even though maybe you don't know what their culture is or what that you're doing the right thing. If they see a good person, then I think that's going to be that's going to go a long ways. So again, could you talk a little about Abu Ghraib and why you use that as an example and how that has a bearing on NCOs out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 20 years ago, right? So this is 2003. We're talking about, at the point where things sort of, fall out of our organizational awareness as well. But you raise a great point, right? Is that what we saw there was not at its core a lack of cultural awareness training. Like it was a lack of values. Period. For those that don't know the story of Abu Ghraib, 2003 story broke that U.S. soldiers in a detention facility committed just gross violations of law of land warfare with detainees at Abu Ghraib. resulted in the commanding officers relieved and 11 soldiers convicted of crimes for those actions. And I use it in the article, when it was a gross violation, right, and not a, by no means were they just violating, cultural taboos. They were violating human taboos, right? Human violations of human rights standards. But I use it in the article because one of the recommendations that the investigating officer included was additional training for those managing foreign detainees, and that includes it includes cultural awareness. It includes cultural appreciation, right? Because even at their core levels, those things also help kind of stop that xenophobia, that fear of foreign cultures. What we saw at Abu Ghraib, right, is people who did not respect another culture, likely did not see them as human beings on some level, and that's what allowed overtook their any sense of Army values, those kinds of things that they had existed, and led to them committing those violations. The culture of that organization allowed that to happen. So it's further argument that even at a core level, cultural awareness and appreciation helps build that sensitivity, that openness to other cultures, that respecting differences in other people as positive, and ultimately, what we saw, the impact of Abu Ghraib helps prevent those things, maintain our image of international cooperation, that the U.S. Army upholds human rights standards. Like those are things that are not up for debate. Those are things that we have to maintain, and actions like our soldiers at Abu Ghraib directly complicate and inhibit our ability, our operational success. Right? I mean, we saw the impact of that. We saw decreased support for the war at home. We lost coalition partners, and I think what one of the things I note there, like perhaps worse, is those of us who were fighting in Iraq during that decade. It instantly led to increased recruiting for Al Qaeda, insurgent jihadists fighting in Iraq. Fighting got intense following that for those of us there. And the article includes a great quote from General McChrystal. He said, in his experience, nearly every first-time jihadist claimed Abu Ghraib was what had first jolted him to action. So the actions of a few, extremely terrible in this case, had years and years of negative implications to our stability operations in Iraq.
How do you think that one incident by those 11 soldiers really impacted the future of the war?
Well, legitimacy is a theme that we kind of focus on anytime we're operating outside the U.S., right? Especially with a foreign audience. We're there. We're there for the sake of international cooperation. We're there, with the support of the government, and without legitimacy, all of the good work that we're doing in that place can easily be overlooked. So, there were a lot of us working in that country for a long time, doing great things, and all of that up to that point was kind of wiped out with one event. So, we, I can't speak for how long we would have been in Iraq otherwise, but I think it absolutely goes to saying that there was direct impact to those fighting in Iraq for the short years that followed.
I'd like to start focusing this now to our audience and what actions they can take. And so my question to you, Sergeant Major, would be, you mentioned a call to action earlier for individuals to focus on regional cultural awareness and things like that they can do on their own time. But what can junior NCOs out there, direct leading soldiers, what can they do? And then what would your advice be for senior leaders, senior NCOs?
as I said, I think our units aren't always. This isn't something that our units are always going to have on the training calendar. So, at a core level, I think it's learning about the other cultures around you. If you don't have a basic level of foreign cultural awareness, and no one's directed you, look for something. As I said, JKO is a huge repository of training that's not going to consume your time. Rapport training, cultural awareness training, things that'll benefit you just for an overseas vacation, if nothing else. But ultimately, we'll support you operationally. But by all means, if your organization has a regional focus, if your organization has been identified for a potential upcoming deployment for yourself and your team, your subordinates, immediately start diving into, clear space on the training calendar for that rapport training, for that cultural awareness training. Those are things that are immediately available to every soldier. It's in JKO. They have a language and cultural category. And there's subsets underneath that for specific GCCs and their areas of responsibility. So if you know where you might go, by all means, start focusing on that. And as with all training, the more lead time we have, the more you can build from that cultural capability up to that cultural and regional expertise.
It would be a great opportunity for some hip pocket training. To do some sergeant's training, just kind of unscheduled, and just pop it in there for soldiers as not just organized, but something that NCOs. That's what you guys do, man. What NCOs do is train, and that would be a great opportunity to do something that's not necessarily formal. If you're a small unit leader, a sergeant, and you have however many soldiers you have.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Now that you mentioned it, I was like thinking, well, there's some events that are happening on our calendars already, right? We have National Hispanic Heritage Month, and so maybe add to that, that training for that month or whatever, the observance, by having discussions or having people bring in different dishes and talking about different cultures, or even if you have a team. I remember I had a team that was very diverse, and even everybody just sharing something about their culture or their upbringing and things like that, and having those discussions can have impact too.
Yeah, absolutely. The more exposure we have to other cultures, is the more that general appreciation and acknowledgement of the considerations that that go into those things to kind of help peel back our own layers of our cultural onion, right, and open ourselves to other ways of thinking and understanding.
And then it becomes an actual weapon, like you said in the title of your article. It just becomes another weapon in your arsenal. Something else that you're using to prepare and to fight the enemy.
Yeah, but so much easier to influence someone towards a behavior than to try and coerce or force someone towards that behavior. And so that's, where I talk about human advantage. This is the weapon that we gain advantage in the human dimension for.
Sergeant Major, before we conclude this podcast today, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think I would be remiss, and I'd probably get in trouble with my command if I don't at least mention how to go RSOF. I do use Army Special Operations as a primary example of where in the article where we're doing real good around the world on a regular basis, and where cultural and regional expertise it's critical to mission success. And so for anyone out there listening, if you've thought at all, if the idea of a job where cultural regional expertise interests you and is critical to it, I think RSOF is something you should definitely look into. And for most of us, that starts with seeking out your local Special Operations Recruiting Battalion, your local SORB, or goarmysoft.army.mil. And for our Compo 2 and 3 Army Reserve or National Guard Bureau soldiers, just reach out to your local retention NCO and they'll put you in touch with a nearby unit as well.
Thank you, Sergeant Major, for joining us, and a thank you to our audience. Remember to put your knowledge to the page. Submit articles and get published with the NCO Journal. Don't forget to check out our webpage and follow us on social media. We'll catch you next time on the NCO Journal podcast.